everybody. This is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel today. Today I have a layout that I made using the March My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit. This month the kit features a beautiful collection by Prima, and it was designed by Frank Garcia, and it is called Peach Tea. I'm starting the layout by working on two opposite corners. I'm going to put triangles, and I'm going to cover those triangles with some strips of pattern paper. Whenever I work with Prima collections, I find that I do a whole lot of fussy cutting, and that often leaves some papers that can be cut into strips, so I often like to put strips together on pieces of paper when I use lots of collections, but especially Prima collections. Some of the pieces are long, some of the pieces are very short, and I'm going to combine all of those to create these two corner pieces. I cut these triangles at right angles. I covered this whole triangle with some ATG adhesive, and then I started on the edge that's going to be closest to the center of the layout, and I worked out from there. The strips of paper are 1/2 inch wide, and I often think that I should vary the width of the pieces, but I always end up going back to this 1/2 inch measurement. It's the width of the branding strips, and it's a nice width, and it's not too wide and not too thin, so I have stuck with it, but I also think that varying the width of the strips would look nice as well. So I covered the second triangle with the strips, and then I used my trimmer and I cut away all the excess. I'm using a cut file that is available to the My Creative Scrapbook subscribers. This is by Pear Tree Cut Files, and it says, "Loving This Life." I have already backed the cut file. It's off to the left. I finally figured out my procedure for backing cut files and then stitching on them. So first I backed the cut file using the Prima paper. For this layout, I used all of the same pattern. Some of the pattern was from a pattern paper and some of it was from one of the 3x4 inch cards, but you could see that it's all the same pattern. Then I cut out another cut file. This time I didn't cut the inside lines, just the outside lines, and it's not an offset, it's the exact same size, and I glued that to the back of the backed cut file. And then once that dried, I punched holes and then I stitched it just using a regular backstitch. The reason for gluing the second cut file to the back of the cut file that has the pattern paper on it is because it makes the paper a little bit thicker, and then it can hold the stitches better than if it's very thin and flimsy. Sometimes the stitches will rip through the side of the paper. I initially made a mixed media background for this layout. I made a green background and I didn't end up liking it, but I ended up using that background for another layout. And for this layout, I'm using this beautiful pattern paper that was in the kit. It's a pink paper with a white dot on it. I used an EK Success border punch and some smooth white cardstock, and I punched out a border and I put one on either side of the layout. Right now I'm using some Distress Oxide in gathered twigs to ink the edges of the triangles. I forgot to do that before I attached them down, and then I tucked those border strips underneath the triangles. Often when I ink things and they're already attached to the page, I will get the ink in places I don't want it, so I peeled that triangle up quite a bit to make sure that that didn't happen. There were lots of images of hot air balloons in this collection, and I gathered together 4 of them. One of them is rather large, and then 3 of them are on the smaller side, and I inked the edges of all of them again with the gathered twigs Distress Oxide. I'm going to use those hot air balloons on the background, but I don't know where to put them right now, so I put them to the side, and then I put some adhesive on the back of the cut file, and I'm going to attach that down to the page. The photo that I'm going to use is on the lower right-hand corner right now, and I've already put some white cardstock behind it to give it a white border. I positioned the cut file in the middle of the page, but I also want to make sure that I have room for my photo on the right-hand side of the cut file. I love the way there's always a nice spot to put photos with these Pear Tree cut files. So the cut file is a little bit to the left of the layout, but the right-hand side of the photo and the left-hand side of the cut file are each about the same distance from the edge of the paper. Now that I have all of the major elements of the layout attached down to the background, I am going to start embellishing the layout. I put the hot air balloons on the layout. I'm also adding some of the beautiful prima dimensional flowers that are included in the kit. And I have selected a few chipboard pieces to add to the layout. I love that little banner that's over the word life that says, "Life is sweet with you by my side." I also have picked out some chipboard hearts, and I also have a measuring tape that's underneath the photo, and underneath the measuring tape is a little tiny sentiment that says "the sweetest." That was fussy cut from one of the pattern papers, and then I mounted on one of the strips of paper that I didn't use to make the two triangles. I also put a heart to the right of the sentiment, "the sweetest." I'm going to attach that large hot air balloon on the bottom and one of the smaller ones on the top right to the background, but I'm going to pop up two of them using some foam. So the two hot air balloons that I'm going to pop up using some foam, I attach down to some heavyweight cardstock, and that will prevent those from sagging when I pop them up on some foam. I just like the way that that looks, and I've been doing that a lot lately, and I've been happy with the results. The purple foam, that's fun foam. It's adhesive on one side. You can get that in the kids craft section. I had some questions about where you could get that, and it's great for adding some dimension to your pages. This time I didn't pop up the cut file on foam. The reason for that is when I stitch on the cut file, the back of the cut file has stitching on it, and that helps to give the cut file a little bit of dimension without even putting any foam on it. So I just went ahead and attached it down as it was, and it does pop off the page a little bit. This photo is of both of my daughters. This was taken in 2017. We were on vacation in Cape Cod, and there is a restaurant there. It's called Basil Thai Cuisine, and it's just a restaurant in like a tiny strip mall, and we tried it one year because it was close to our hotel, and the food was absolutely amazing. So we've been going back there every year that we've gone there, and that is some of the best Thai food that I've ever had. Probably the best. It was really good, very memorable. I'm attaching the flowers down to the background now. I'm using some Liquitex heavy duty gel medium, and it has a matte finish so that when it dries it's just totally clear. It's a great adhesive. It can hold things down really well, and another nice thing is it doesn't dry super fast, and normally I like it when things dry fast, but for these embellishments sometimes I want to play around with them a little bit, so it has a nice combination of giving you a chance to play around with them and get them just right, but then once you leave them in place, this adhesive holds things down quite well. I used an EK Success scalloped photo corner punch, and I punched out some photo corners, one for each of the four corners. I inked the edges with the Distress Oxide. I ended up with 3 chipboard hearts on the layout, and I'm adding some self-adhesive pearls to each of those hearts to add a little bit of extra detail to them. As always, I reinforce any chipboard that I put on my page with some additional adhesive. Now I'm adding some more self-adhesive pearls. This time I'm adding them to the photo corners, and I'm using a slightly larger pearl for that. At this stage of the layout, I often like to add some leaves. I'm using a Tessler craft die, and I love this die because it has 2 different size branches on it. I'm using white cardstock, and I'm inking it with some dried marigold, that's the light orange color, and also some abandoned coral, that is the color on the left. And I'm using a combination of these colors. First I'm putting on the lighter color, and then I go in with the darker color, but I like to leave a little bit of each color showing so that the leaves look interesting. Once I have a number of the die cuts inked, I begin tucking them into different places on the layout. I'm mainly going to place them in the flower clusters, but I add some leaves to some other places on the layout too. This large title cut file provides a lot of opportunities for tucking embellishments underneath it. And I'm happy with the little pop of color that those leaves add. I think it's nice to have another color that is as bright as the blue flowers that are on the layout. The intensity is similar with those two colors. I had placed a lot of the leaves where I wanted them, but I luckily hadn't glued them down yet because I decided to add some more of the gathered twigs distress oxide to them. I'm just adding a little bit of that to the edges of the leaves. Next, I use some gel glue and I glue the leaves in place. And I always glue the leaves at the base because I don't like the look of them attached firmly down to the layout. I like them to have a little bit of shadow underneath them. And also there have been many times in the past where I've had to take some branches or leaves off the layout, and it's a lot easier if they are attached underneath something else. They come off the layout so much more easily that way. And now I wanted to add a little bit of Bow Bunny glitter paste in sugar, which is a clear glitter paste. It adds just some glitter and a lot of shine to whatever you put it on. So I put some of that on all of the flowers, and then I thought, why don't I just add it to the leaves as well so that the flowers and the leaves will match in that way. And I was able to put a piece of paper underneath the leaves so that I didn't get the glitter paste all over everything when I applied them to the leaves. Now I'm using some heavy gesso and a small sponge, and I'm just dabbing a little bit of the gesso on the flowers. I like the way this looks. I think that it adds a little bit of highlight to those flowers. I also add just a touch of the gesso to some of the leaves. I wanted to add a little bit of white back into the clusters. When I have cut files that are cut out of white paper, I like to have a lot of white touches around the page. So I used some dies that were in my stash. This looks like a branch with buds on it to me. And so I cut out a number of these and then I cut them into smaller pieces, and now I'm tucking them into the clusters again just to add a little bit of white back in. And then it's also a very small die, and I like to have that detail in each of the clusters. I wanted to mention that I added a little bit more stitching to the layout. I just felt that it would look better if there was some stitching at the edge of both of the triangles. So if you look there close to the lace border that I punched out of the paper, you could see that I added a single row of stitching on both of those triangles. I continue to add those small pieces of the die cut to mainly the clusters and by the orange branches that I've already put on the layout. And sometimes they were very tiny, and I used my scissors to help me position them. I also added two very, very small pearls to that blue banner that's between the words "this" and "life." And then I went in with the gel glue and I glued all of those little white branches down to the layout. Once all of those branches are glued down, that completes this layout. Here are some close-ups. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and I appreciate it that you stayed all the way to the end. I hope that you enjoyed it and maybe got an idea or two from the video. Please take a look in the description box. You will find the link to the My Creative Scrapbook website, and you can view all of the kits from this month and purchase them there. I hope everybody has a fantastic day, and I will see you again soon with another layout. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.